All right. So without further ado, I guess we're gonna bring in Anthony Tolda.
Anthony, you're on, Anthony.
Hi, it's good to be with you.
Hi there. Welcome to the show.
Good to be here.
Sorry we're a little late today.
Oh, it's okay. It happens. It's so long, they say, right?
Well, you know, I got kicked out of the show, and then I couldn't call back in, and people were getting dropped right and left, and they couldn't call back in, and it was craziness. So
they kicked me out of the host spot too, Anthony.
Okay, so I'll make sure if I get kicked off, I'll make sure to call right back.
Yeah.
Do that.
Okay.
So what's your thoughts on what's going on with Adam Kokeshite? He starts with this 10,000 armed man march on Washington D.C. and that is funny that he gets arrested in Philly with all this hoopla, and then after that he's coming back and saying what I suggested on the show, that we don't need to march on D.C. We need to march on all our state capitals, arm in arm with our local sheriff.
Right. First and foremost, I just wanted to introduce myself to the audience. I'm not thinking that everybody knows who I am, so I should probably do that, right?
Right.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right. Well, my name's Anthony Tolda. I've run for the United States Congress twice up against Democrat Steve Israel here in New York. It used to be District 2, but they redrew the district lines, so in 2012 I ran versus the same incumbent, but only it was District 3 in New York instead of 2. I made worldwide news yelling at him at our town hall meeting on healthcare in October 2009, and I've been running against him ever since. I made the ballot with the Constitution Party twice. I qualified for the Republican primary in 2012, and I had the distinct honor of being thrown off of the primary ballot the same year Ron Paul was, in a shady manner, to say the least. And I've founded my own party, or our own party, Sovereignty Party of America. I think that's the best way for us to fix our problems in America, is to educate people about the principles and the degrees of sovereignty, and why it's so important for us to be knowledgeable about the issues of sovereignty and how to assert those rights. And I feel like we've earned that name after this whole Adam Kokesh mess, because a lot of people miss here is that D.C. has a specific type of sovereignty that goes beyond our concepts of sovereignty as individuals and our concepts of sovereignty in regards to the states. And this is this is permissible by Article 1, Section 8 in the Constitution, and it was signed into law by George Washington with the Residency Act of 1790. That's why we know it as Washington, D.C., and there was some problems with the court system trying to influence what goes on in D.C., and the Founding Fathers couldn't believe this. They thought it was ridiculous that they had already been crystal clear with Article 1, Section 8 and with the Residency Act. So to firm things up, they passed the Organic Act, and the reason they gave it that title is because they thought it was ridiculous they even had to pass the bill. The Organic Act of 1801, the reasoning behind calling it Organic Act was it was their way of saying, this is organically what we've stated already. We're reaffirming this because people aren't getting it for some reason. So just in case you had any questions, we're really, really sure about this. The courts can't rule on D.C. Federal government has sole authority over D.C., period, end of story. They've made this crystal clear for us. And if you want to march on D.C., you're going to have to repeal the Organic Act and or the Residency Act if you want to do it legally. If not, you have to deal with what the federal government says. That's what the law is, and it's permitted by our Constitution.
Interesting.
And if I could explain briefly why that is, it wasn't set in stone in the Constitution because the Founding Fathers weren't sure if they would need this sovereign nation capital, but they wanted to provide for it just in case they needed it. And then there was what was called the Philadelphia Mutiny of 1783, where there was a group of unpaid troops that marched on a meeting of Congress in Philadelphia, And so 7 years later, and this is a testament to show you the wisdom of the Founding Fathers and how they operated and how the government operated, it took them 7 years, or approximately 7 years, to pass this bill in response to what could have been a pretty serious event and attack on our national security. So, you know, you think about what went on with September 11th and the Patriot Act. It didn't take us 7 years to get to the Patriot Act. A lot quicker than that. And you know, unlike the Residency Act, you combine the Residency Act to the Patriot Act. The Residency Act was entirely logical, whereas Patriot Act is just completely illogical and a usurpation of power, and it's unconstitutional, and I think it should be repealed. So the other, this has been a two-pronged approach for me. The other issue I've been going after is the mental state of Adam Kokesh.
Right.
Well, you take a look at the guy, and if you know anything about psychology and antisocial personality disorder, I spoke with a psychologist who's requested to remain anonymous, and I'm honoring that request. He has not had direct contact with Adam Kokesh, but he's had some various third-party contact. He's made it clear that there was more than one means of this third-party contact, so he's about as close as you could get to diagnosing without being able to officially diagnose. And I'm going to put this in layman terms, there are 3 different checklists that are traditionally and clinically used to diagnose antisocial personality disorder, and the 2 of us went through every checklist, and he not only met the minimum requirement to qualify to be highly likely for affirmative diagnosis, he exceeded that minimum number on all 3 lists. So if you look at things statistically, 10% of all males are born with some form of psychosis, antisocial personality disorder, and thankfully for this world, only 1% of females are born that way. And then there's also a degree to which it's a learned behavior. So,
don't get me going down this slippery slope and this rabbit hole Anthony told about the psychiatric industry and all the nonsense and all the labeling they come up with. I don't go for it.
Look, this is life, okay? There's good and evil in all walks of life, including psychology. So you can paint with a broad stroke and say that all psychologists are quacks and nut jobs and work for the government to throw good people in jail, or you could accept the fact that good and evil exists in all walks of life. And, you know, I've done my best to learn from people that I believe are good in regards to this, and I do acknowledge there are people that are bad, and I want nothing to do with the evils of psychology. I'm interested in the good that could be done.
Right. Well, I'm just saying that I've had the doc on my show 2 or 3 times. She's a deep throat whistleblower from the psychiatric industry, and I just don't go for this credence. It's a tool. It's a tool used to propagate big pharma and to propagate conditioning. And that's my 2 cents.
You're entitled to your opinion, but if you're going to tell me the entire industry is evil, I can't accept your premise, because there are good people and bad people in life, and it does not matter the context.
I'll preclude that. I'll say 9 out of 10 of them are either duped or know what the hell they're doing.
Well, here's the thing. The listening audience either believes that there's some good that's possible out of psychology, or they believe that there's no good, or they're somewhere in the middle. You and I having a debate over the validity of psychology or the context I'm using it in isn't really going to help anybody decide anything. So I wish we could just continue with my work and not really discuss the merits of the context.
Yeah, actually, Austin, I agree. I want to hear what he has to say.
Fair enough. I just want to put my 2 cents in with my disclaimer.
Right.
Okay.
Again, 10% of males are born with some type of psychosis/antisocial personality. Thankfully for this world, only 1% of females. So we're looking at approximately 5% of the population born biologically different, without ability to empathize, feel feelings of remorse, feel anxiety when they lie. Just imagine being able to go through life completely evil and not having a second thought about it at all, ever. And that's what these people are. And there's also a degree to which it's a learned behavior. So in layman's terms, someone that's biologically born like this is known as a psychopath, and when it's a learned behavior, they're known as a sociopath, but it's considered more appropriate to use the term antisocial personality disorder. So when I suspect this about Kokesh and I begin to make this case about Kokesh, I have a greater than 10% chance of being correct just for the fact that the people that are males being born with it and it being a learned behavior. When you add in the 3 checklists, to use a layman's term, and the fact that he not only meets the minimum requirement but exceeds that requirement on every list of the 3, plus you add in the fact of his father's behavior. His father's a wealthy 1%er venture capitalist with ties to the Democrat Party for a very long time, who's about to go to jail, and I'm pretty sure has been to jail before for scamming people, and you factor in that this is a learned behavior and his father has displayed the behavior traits, and our anonymous psychologist source has agreed with me in regards to his father. When you add all of these things in together, my odds of being correct going from, a random 10% plus, now we're probably talking around 98, 99% chance of me being correct.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah.
And so when you learn to view this disorder and learn to be able to spot the behaviors, it's easier for you to outsmart these people. And it's been said that George W. Bush had this. I certainly believe that Obama has this. And part of how people with this disorder that take these alpha roles in life, these power roles, part of what they do to control people is neurolinguistic programming, which is stirring up people's emotions, making statements that are somewhat general and arbitrary and difficult to argue with, using imagery and analogies that twist ideology to the will of the speaker so that they can then implant the thoughts that they want these people to absorb and regurgitate like zombies. And that's what goes on. If you ever have an argument with an Obama supporter and you confront them with the evidence of Tony Rezko, of William Ayers, of his childhood in Indonesia, renouncing his citizenship, never changing his name back from Barry Soetoro, you get the same programmed, robotic, zombie-like responses from your average Obama supporter. And I'm noticing a parallel when you confront people with problems with Adam Kokesh, the way he was raised, his father's behavior, his highly likely possibility of antisocial personality disorder, his ties to Code Pink that are a known communist group that work hand in glove with Westboro Baptist Church to harass families of fallen soldiers at funerals, and the Patriot Guard riders have to show up and be a physical barrier. You confront somebody with all these things about Adam, the fact that he spent most of his time in the service and in a psychology classroom learning how to bend people's minds at the will of our government, that he wasn't a combat vet.
Wait. Repeat that again?
He spent most of his time in the service in a psychology classroom. He was in the military PSYOPs program, and he's even admitted this to Alex Jones.
Wow.
So,
see, now that right there is the biggest smoking gun of all.
Yes, that's what Harry.
Well, there's many more. He's got ties to Putin and the CIA big time.
I've heard that as well. He wasn't a combat vet. He went on essentially an 18-day field trip in some different areas in the Middle East, never fired a shot, never had a shot fired at him. So when he says he has post-traumatic stress disorder, I'm wondering where he got it from, because I guess he got it in the classroom somehow, because he certainly didn't get it from combat. And he was actually, the reason he was discharged was because he got caught stealing his firearm, and nobody could prove this, but some people suspect he did it on purpose to get out. He was going to get honorable discharge, kept showing up to protests run by leftists in his uniform, and he was repeatedly warned to stop, refused to stop, and so then he got a general discharge as opposed to honorable. General's not as bad as dishonorable, quite a far cry from honorable. Basically means your conduct is unacceptable, in some way, shape, or form, but it wasn't bad enough for them to give you dishonor.
Again, that's a slippery slope, too, because I see the military-industrial complex using our soldiers in various ways to advance the petrodollar and to advance their agendas. And second point I want to touch on, if the guy wants to be a pinko Nazi, or if he wants to be a communist, he has every right to do that according to the First Amendment of the Constitution, as long as he doesn't infringe on anybody else's rights or privileges.
I'm not saying he doesn't. What I'm saying is he's lucky they were willing to give him an honorable discharge in the first place, because he got caught stealing a firearm from the military. I think that's pretty serious.
I think what Anthony's trying to do is show us a pattern of behaviors and all the intelligence that he's gathered on Kokesh that makes him believe that he's not credible. So everyone can draw their own conclusions based on the information shared.
Right. I'm not supporting the military as a whole, but losing Kokesh. I'm not supporting psychology as a whole.
I just want to say I agree with you on Kokesh. I smelt a rat for a long time. And however way you want to paint the picture, it's going to end up that the guy is COINTEL, he's PSYOP, and he is definitely an agent provocateur in my mind. There's no doubt.
Well, we're agreed there then. And, when I say these things, I'm not fully endorsing the behaviors of our military. If you do due diligence on me, I'm a Ron Paul-inspired candidate. I want to bring our troops home. I want them, if anything, I want to give them jobs on Border Patrol and secure our borders for once.
Right. And I just want to, put in my 2 cents, too. I mean, this guerrilla radio, it's over here.
Sure. Hey, everybody's entitled to opinion. I just wanted to clarify that I'm not, this is in no way, shape, or form, an endorsement of all military behaviors. It's not how I feel. But in regards to the matters specifically relating to Adam Kokesh, I feel like they gave him a lot of lenience. I feel like he's lucky he got a general discharge after behaving the way he behaved. You steal your issued firearm when you know it's illegal, and then you go around on all these leftist protests in your uniform. I mean, you can go to all the protests he wants, but once they tell him to stop repeatedly, and he doesn't, it's blatant disrespect. And it just goes...
Well, I proceed, please, because I'm interested in your story and the conclusions that you've drawn. So you know about his post-traumatic stress. That's where we were at last.
Yes, which he claims, I don't know if he's ever been specifically diagnosed, but he claims and recounts stories of having problems being in crowds and, reaching for his gun all the time. And so if we were to accept that he actually has it, then, he would be the last person you would want leading what's, proposed to be, a peaceful march. I mean, what if we're talking about Independence Day here, too. What if somebody blows up an M80 and he freaks out and he thinks he's in a war zone and starts shooting people? We don't know. I mean, from his accounts, from what he says happens to him in crowds and he gets startled. Well, I'm a pyrotechnician. Okay, the company I work with had a problem on a barge a long time before I worked with them, and fireworks were blowing up all over the barge. And they had a veteran on that, he's a good worker, good person, happened to have a little post-traumatic stress, and he started flashing back to being in battle because he was in a container, a metal container, getting hit. The container was getting hit with fireworks shells, and the men were fine. Everybody came out without a scratch. But being in that situation brought him back and affected his mental state for a while. So Adam has the same condition. Independence Day, all it takes is a couple of M80s to go off from some people messing around with him, and then all of a sudden you have a bloodbath on your hands. The man is just not mentally fit to lead something like this.
I agree. I mean, if we want to have an armed march on Washington, which in itself is risky business, the leader, whoever's in front of the whole thing, the whole movement, is going to be looked to for direction. And if they're, trigger happy, it's a disaster waiting to happen.
The whole point is it was all a psyop to divide the Second Amendment, the constitutionalists, and the liberals. It's all a divide and conquer. It's all a psyop. It never was going to happen. You saw how this all played out. This is just another little psyop that they put out there for us to try and divide us. It's obvious as the nose on your face. If you step back and take a look at it, you can see it for what it really is.
Well, I mean, that's potential. That's obviously a potential. That it was never planned to go forward in the first place. Or it could also be that a lot of people like Anthony started speaking out and putting videos out there and dividing the feeling of the awake community, because that's exactly what happened. I mean, in the beginning it was like, hell yeah, an armed march on Washington. Yeah, Second Amendment, here we go. And then people started thinking about it a little more, and they're like, oh, wait, that might not be good. and so when people started really, really thinking it through, they started questioning, well, who is this guy anyway, and why would he say this, and can we trust him, and digging deeper, and a lot of stuff started coming out. That's kind of my personal belief on what happened. I mean, I think there's a lot of things that have not gone down that could have gone down due to, the awake community and how they react to situations, because they've got to have people be, somewhat neutral in a situation where they can control them and their thought process. If there's enough people out there seeing through something, it's dangerous for them to proceed. So, but anyway. All right, so Anthony, please continue.
Okay, so there's some terms I'm going to be using that are new to some people. What's really interesting, I think, about this whole thing is it's going to help pioneer this relatively new science in psychology/sociology. There's a book, Political Ponerology, in a form that lands somewhere between psychology and sociology, called Ponerology, and it's they call it a study, science on the nature of evil. And the ponerogenic process is when you have people with various mental disorders having this uncanny ability to work together for evil goals. They will infiltrate a social situation, whether it's political or religious or a corporation, and find ways to get positions of power in whatever group that they're taking over, work with each other, use the original ideology and twist it so that it could so that they could facilitate their evil goals with it, and they wind up finding ways to either push out the people that are pure and good in the movement, and brainwash as many people as they can, and they do wind up taking in large groups of people that otherwise don't have anything mentally wrong with them, other than that they get swept up in this illness. So it's almost, if you can picture it, it's a contagious form of mental illness. So the way to dispel this is to have it diagnosed, and once it's diagnosed, what they noticed was that the subjects of this experience what they call shock and disintegration upon noticing they've been under the traumatizing influence of a macro-social pathological phenomenon. But after their initial knee-jerk reaction and their ego defending their embarrassment, eventually their thought process takes over, and they have some time for the ideas to kick around in their head, and they figure it out that, hey, something's wrong here, I was duped, and then they lose interest. And I think that, it's not solely due to my efforts, but I think this, to a significant degree, due to my efforts, a lot of his followers are, seeing that there's something wrong with him, that he's not stable, and, I think that they're losing interest, and hopefully, a lot of them are looking into the legality and the constitutionality, Article 1, Section 8, the Residency Act and the Organic Act, and hopefully that's, waking a lot of people up as well.
Well, and then another thing that people need to keep in mind is there are a lot of agents and shills among us, and, the government has unlimited resources as far as funds to do such a thing, And it's a great resource in controlling, because obviously what's important to them is controlling the thoughts of the people. You know, if you can control the thoughts of the people and you know, what they're believing and what they're standing for, you can control them. And, you know, that's been an ongoing experiment that's out there with the government for a long time. You know, as far as, who is it, Edward Bernays?
Right.
Isn't that the guy who started with the social engineering?
That's Mr. Propaganda to you.
Oh, yes, excuse me, Mr. Propaganda. Yeah, so, you know, that started a long time ago with Edward Bernays, and that's out there. You know, that's public knowledge. And so, you know, why would it have stopped? Of course it has not. It has continued. And so, you know, this was something that I struggled with when I first woke up. A lot of it I was like, oh, there's no way. You know, that's not possible. That's just not rational. But the more you look at things, the more you look at history and you know, things that have been admitted to have happened, and the motive behind the people who are at the top and what their ultimate goal is, it all starts to fit together and make sense, and it's not a pretty picture.
Of course, because they count on everyone having cognitive dissonance. They don't want to believe it. They can't believe it that our government could do such a thing, or these elitists could do such a thing, or our president could do these type of things. I mean, just look at false flags. I mean, like Gulf of Tonkin. I mean, there's many throughout history. I mean, starting with Goebbels and Hitler and the burning of the Reichstag in Germany. I mean, these are tools of propaganda used to get people to conform to their ideologies.
Well, even who was it? I think it was the Aurora shooting the movie guy, the movie theater shooter. What's his name? Do you guys remember?
Oh, I'm having a brain freeze right now.
I am too. Anyway, by the way, that's 5 minutes from my house.
Oh, wow.
Kind of freaky. Yeah, kind of freaky. But anyway, he got involved in an advanced psychology program, you know, in college. And I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to make the quick point before I forget that a lot of them do study psychology, end up falling into studying psychology. So it's good that you bring that point up.
Yeah, and so they get sucked into these programs and probably told to do certain things, and they're thinking, oh, I can get to the head of this class. This professor wants me involved in,
MK Ultra.
Right. Well, what I'm saying is that these kids are wanting to be aggressive in their studies. They hear they've got an opportunity to be part of some sort of, you know, huge experiment. You know, they make it sound like it's really great, and then all of a sudden, they're exposed to maybe some form of MK Ultra or something like that, mind control. Who knows? God knows what happens, and it changes that person, and that's exactly what was said to have happened to him. His personality after joining that program literally changed. It completely changed, and he became a different person than he was when he entered into it, which in itself is a huge red flag. So, you know, I just wanted to throw that in there as far as plausibility, you know, of someone being in a military, and that's why I stopped you earlier. If they're in the military, and in the military they're involved in some big, you know, psychiatric program, God knows what they were exposed to and what happened to them and how it changed them. And so it does leave the door open to quite a few possibilities.
Yes, that's true. So Kokesh and, his followers is really what's fueling him, so, it's easier to cure his followers of this mental illness than it is to cure Kokesh about his mental illness, because his followers don't have it, or most of them don't have it nearly to the degree that Kokesh has it. Another thing interesting that I find interesting about Kokesh is nobody on the right or in the Ron Paul movement never heard of him really until 2009. Ron Paul endorsed him. He was somehow able to pull the wool over Ron Paul's eyes and get a personal endorsement, speak at some rallies. Keep in mind the timeline. Keep in mind the timeline here. If I could finish,
well,
we're talking 2009.
I'm going to let you finish, and then I'm going to put in my 2 cents.
Thank you. So we're talking 2009 here, right? We got stuck with Obama from the election of 2008. We know that Obama has all these communist ties. He won't come out and say, I'm a communist, but he might as well. We know he's a communist. We know his policies are communist, and we know his statements are communist. So look at Kokesh. We know there's the ties to Code Pink and the other leftist groups, protesting the war, which it's fine. Protest the war, I'm okay with that. But it's the other stuff that they're about, the gun control that these same groups are about. The Code Pink is about gun control. These are his real friends. His real friends are not the Ron Paul people. They're the people that he has the longer history with, the communists. So if Obama comes in and he sees Ron Paul and the Ron Paul movement as the biggest threat to him ideology-wise, especially when you consider the youth, and we know the communists always go after the youth, well, what's the perfect way for him to marginalize that movement? To put a plant in there, make sure that plant climbs a ladder real quick, holds that rung, and control as much of the youth in that opposition movement as you could possibly control. It's a brilliant plan if that's what, in fact, Obama is doing here. And when you look at the fact that he's highly likely to face impeachment very soon over 3 different scandals, plus has the eligibility issue on his head, if he ever needed to tap this plant of his to not only keep himself in power, but to get himself a bunch of sweeping new powers through simultaneous incidents at our nation's capitals, because his plan is now to have these armed protests at all 50 state capitals, well, then you got yourself a plan.
That's an interesting theory. I like the end of that. Where that there's a powers above him pulling strings for an ultimate goal of resurrecting dwindling power. So yeah, I can see that. Okay, Austin, we know you don't like Ron Paul. Go ahead.
Well, I love Ron Paul. I'm just going to state a fact that Ron Paul is, I went through the cognitive dissonance myself with this. I loved Ron Paul, but he is controlled opposition. He really is. If you think about it now, again, look at in 2008 when he dropped out of the race before the big push. This time when he dropped out of the race again before the big push, he is. I'm not saying he's a bad man. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying that you have to step back and see things for what they are. The man is controlled opposition. He has ties with the Masons, and he has big ties with the legions that be are basically hoodwinked him. I don't know if they threatened his family or if he's threatened Rand. And I think it's funny how his son Rand Paul throws him under the bus totally. There's like some major psyops going on there too. And again, that's my opinion.
I'm going to guess you mean Rand throwing him under the bus by supporting Romney. I just want to get, the facts straight that Ron Paul did not drop out of the Republican race. He was tossed off of the primary ballot that he legitimately and legally earned ballot status. They changed the rules the last minute. They diverted a bus of his delegates so that they couldn't be seated. They refused to seat a whole state worth of his Nevada delegates. It was very fraudulent and shady and deceptive the way the whole, Republican National Convention happened, and I was thrown off the ballot in a fraudulent manner in the same way. So you're entitled to your opinions about Ron Paul, but let's get the facts straight here. He was fraudulently thrown off of the ballot the way I was fraudulently thrown off of the ballot. We're all Americans here. The one thing we should be able to agree on is that the freedom of political speech and qualified candidates belong on the ballots, whether you support the candidate or not.
Hey, Anthony, do you really believe that presidents are elected?
I know that there's a lot of sleight of hand, and honestly, I think that the biggest problem that the third parties have and why they're not making progress is because they keep throwing their resources behind a pipe dream of a presidential candidate, and the party I founded isn't going to do that. I think that our election system with our presidents is completely fraudulent, especially after the last two election cycles and what went on with Obama.
Do you know that every president except one has ties to King George through blood or marriage?
I'm familiar.
And the one that wasn't is Anthony was Martin Van Buren, and he was a huge globalist.
I'm very familiar with the bloodlines and the genetics tracing back. I understand that, but Congress was intended to be the strongest branch of our federal government, and if we get the right people in Congress, which granted there's manipulation that goes on in those races too, but it's not as severe. If we could get a decent Congress, then we would have the Congress being the most powerful branch of government again, and it would.
Yeah.
It would.
Yeah.
Less
I agree. I agree because at the local level, I've seen people get through that are good, patriots. Now, I do think that the whole, presidential part of it is pretty much rigged. I mean, they're going to get who they want, period.
Right. Well, they did this with Reagan. A lot of people don't know, Reagan did not run with Bush Sr. to begin with. I forget the man's name he originally ran with, but he was basically taken aside and said, listen, if you want to win, we're putting you with George Bush Sr., and if you don't like it, we're going to put him with somebody else, and then that person's going to win. So you can play ball and win, or you can not play ball and lose. And he played ball. I honestly believe that Ronald Reagan did the best he could for us, but, he had to keep himself from being killed and playing up all to get there as well.
Well, yeah, because I mean, there is no way, and Ron Paul knew it, that he was ever going to be appointed president. No way.
Well, I think it's really disgraceful that he didn't even get put on the ballot once he qualified. And you say what you want about the man, but he qualified to be on the ballot. They robbed him of the status. It's completely disgraceful and disrespectful after the amount of time the man had in, and there's no excuse for it.
But let me put this to you. What if it was all just a dog and pony show?
We know it is.
Actually, I will say this. When Ron Paul came to Colorado, I was standing next to a fellow patriot who I go to activist meetings with, and he said, Ron Paul, he's like, don't let them win. And he looked at him, and he's like, it's already been decided. I mean, he pretty much, and he actually looked really irritated when he said it. I think my own personal opinion is that his son was his Achilles heel. He is a family man, and he cares about his family, and I personally believe that they were threatened. That's my own personal belief. I think that in protection of his family's life, he caved in to the powers that be. That's my own personal opinion. And not that he's not the type of person to want to cave, but when it came to the life of his children, that had more priority than his pride. And that's my own and it has been proven that his Achilles heel was his family because look at the people on his staff that have betrayed him and actually had ties with his family. So
right, I heard Jesse Benton hurt him a whole lot, and it's unfortunate. And this is how a ponerization works. So you get someone that's even a group or a movement that might be led by somebody that's good, and I know there's some questions of other people's opinions, and if he's good or not, I believe he is good overall. He's human, has weaknesses, makes mistakes, but I think he's done more for the cause of liberty than a lot of other people out there have that hold office. And, Yeah, so even something that is good and stands for the right thing, you run that risk of being partially or wholly Ponerized, and I believe that there is a Ponerization going on with the Ron Paul supporters in the Libertarian Party, and I'm seeing it through this Kokesh nonsense, and I also saw it through the nomination process in 2012 for U.S. Congress. We have fusion voting here in New York. You could run with as many parties as you like. So I was in the Republican primary. I was with the Constitution Party, and I threw my hat into the ring for the Libertarian nomination. And the way the bylaws are written, you need to win all 3 counties. Our district is now a 3-county district, part of Queens, Nassau County, a little bit of Suffolk. And so I won Nassau, which is the largest landmass of the 3, and then the other candidate, this guy McDermott, who got his debut at No Labels, which is a Mayor Bloomberg, Howard Schultz liberal think tank masquerading as a moderate group, he was somehow able to get in with the right people in the Suffolk and Queens parties and get their nominations. So that led us to a stalemate where nobody would get the nomination. So instead of doing the honorable thing and allowing the votes to stand the way they were, the Nassau chairman actually reopened the voting after the voting was done so that he could vote to cause a tie to take the win away from me in Nassau. You can't just open the polls after the polls are closed so you could vote to cause a tie. That's entirely unethical.
It's all a rigged game. Of course you can.
Sure, well, you can. It's all a rigged game. It's not all a rigged. Austin, that is not true, because that is not true. They don't have control of every single person, every single place in the U.S. It's not true. It's not all a rigged game. Yes, there are some corrupt individuals, but guess what? When Ron Paul, the forces came out, they took over a lot of platform key positions for this next coming election. So it's going to be a lot more rigged in our favor, actually, and that's because people are working very, very hard to take back the system. And I do not believe or promote that we should just give up and just say, it's rigged, let's walk away.
No,
people fought and died for the right for us to vote. And that's just a wussy way out, to sit there and say, it's all rigged, let's walk away, let's not do it. I'm sorry, but there is still hope. There is still hope, and we need to go forward with hope in our mind, not with defeat.
Can we say faith instead of hope? I don't like the word hope anymore.
Yeah, right? Well, I don't like defeat.
What we need to do is clean this up. We need to get rid of these die-vote rigged voting machines. We have to go back to handwritten ballots across the nation and have them under lock and key and scrupulously counted. That's the only way we're going to be able to take the elections back to the people.
I agree with that, and I think people should get receipts for their votes, and you still keep the vote anonymous, but if every voter gets a receipt and there's some kind of dispute and enough people want to come forward, you can begin to challenge things in court that way, possibly.
There you go. Now that's a brilliant idea.
There's ways we can fix it, but the last thing we need to do is give up, throw our hands up in the air, and walk away.
You're right, Lisa. That's what Kokesh wants. He wants you to give up on the process, give up on winning seats, give up on running for office, and mindlessly follow him to a bloodbath. That's where the apathy and giving up will get you. A bloodbath with Adam Kokesh, and I want nothing to do with that.
Are you open to another suggestion?
My friend.
Okay, wait.
A good friend of mine
Randy.
here is running for governor in 2014 in Nevada. We're going to take Nevada back. His name is David Laurie Vanderbeek. Have you ever heard of him, Anthony?
I've met him.
Isn't he amazing?
Hey, guys.
He's a good friend of mine here in Vegas.
He's a great guy.
He's the real deal.
I met him at office.
Randy wanted to chime in. Randy's been sitting here listening in on the show, and he had a suggestion.
Are you ready for a suggestion?
Sure.
Yeah.
Talk is cheap. Takes money to buy whiskey. All arguing doesn't solve any problems. What you going to do about it?
Well, I founded the Sovereignty Party of America, and I've also, we didn't get into this on this show yet, but I've also founded the Shadow Militia of the Archangels, and what we're going to do, and what our goal is primarily, is to follow what Adam's calling now. A lot of people don't know this. He has ties to the Crips, and he's reached out to the Black Panthers. The Black Panthers actually have a Facebook page that claims they want to kill cops and injure cops, and he's calling his movement the Revolutionary American Army. So I said, if Adam Kokesh is building himself an army, then I'm going to get together with some good people, and we're going to have a constitutionally vowed militia. And so what we're going to do is we're going to follow Kokesh and his people every time they have an armed protest, and we're going to be intermixed with them. If we could clearly see that we outnumber them, we'll be separate. But if the numbers aren't enough to clearly outnumber, then we're going to intermingle with them. And we want to win psychologically. We don't want to have to take it to the next level. But our idea is, and the premise is, if the average Kokeshite, that's what I call them, instead of the Revolutionary American Army, I call them the Kokeshite Army. So if the Kokeshite Army members know that there could be a sovereignty, a shadow militia of the Archangels member right next to him, and he starts to incite violence, that we're prepared to give him a warning, and if a warning doesn't work, we're prepared to injure him, then, they're a lot more less likely to incite violence. So I'm viewing this whole thing as a set of checks, the citizens' set of checks and balances on our Second Amendment.
I think that's good. I think that's good.
Well,
all right, now let's get back to my friend.
You live with a sword and you die with a sword. There's a better way to deal with it if people are willing to consider it.
The only way you neutralize bad men with guns is good men with guns. That's it. And we're going to have good men with guns neutralizing Adam and the Kokeshites.
Yeah, well, if you'll study history, you'll find that the people that really made the difference were the ones that were working the pen and not the gun, because the people working the pen enabled for the funding of the operation, and the people running the guns and operating them were just the foot soldiers.
Well, I'm doing both. I founded the party to work with the pen, and I founded Shadow Militia of the Archangels to work with the gun. I'm looking to leave no stone unturned in restoring sanity and safety to this nation.
Right. Well, it's just my suggestion. I don't promote any violence, and I believe the First Amendment right to peaceably petition the government for redress of grievances is the only peaceable method to bring this country back to its freedoms.
I'm not going after the government with guns. We're going after Kokesh and his men with guns just to neutralize them.
Yeah.
Because if we
I kind of look at it like this. We all have different functions, okay? It's a body. A body has hands. It has feet. It has legs. It has arms. And each of those things have a different function. I'm not going to say that one body part is superior to another body part, because I think we all need each other and we need to work in unison with each other. I don't think either idea is bad. I think it's great what you're doing, Randy. I mean, I love it. Especially that I'm fighting in the court systems myself. And I'm going to go back and listen to the first half of the show again, take notes, honestly. And, and I love what Anthony is saying, because all it is a check and balance. He's just saying, hey, let's just put a check and balance in this so that they think twice. And hopefully it won't come to anything.
I do not disagree with you, Lisa. Everybody has a part to play. And if people will join together, then you can overcome. If people are unwilling to stop and help the least person, then when they come knock on your door, you're out of luck. So people have to learn to stand up for each other.
Yes, absolutely.
Agreed.
Absolutely.
We do have to stand together, but the whole point, Randy, is this Adam Kokesh is an agent provocateur. He's planted in there to make things divisive. He's not here to rally. It's not as it seems.
Right. He does not have solidarity.
I'm not disputing that point.
Right.
So basically what he's doing is he's assembling other people that are mentally ill. He's warping the minds of people that are impressionable, that are not normally mentally ill, and his leadership, or what he passes off as leadership, is encouraging people with mental disorders to exercise them in ways that they would have